The film begins by depicting the atmosphere of the battle between Yuri Boyka and Arkady Davik, which took place in Russia's maximum security prison, Chornya Kholmy. By betting on Boyka's victory, the audience appeared to be excited to watch the mixed martial arts matches, arrange these fights and place large side bets to make a personal profit, often at the expense of the fighters, with the help of a mob boss, a man named Gaga, Warden Markov, and prison officials. Boyka triumphed as usual, becoming the only fighter to have never been defeated, even in this fight. The scene then shifts to a former boxing champion, George Chambers, whose professional boxing career has faded and who now relies on his meager popularity for money. Chambers returned to his apartment after filming a commercial for a liquor product. Unexpectedly, he was discovered to have been framed by someone who had slipped a packet of cocaine into his Bible. As a result, he was immediately arrested by police for illegal drug possession, and he was unable to avoid it. Chambers was sentenced to prison and was immediately detained at Russia's Chornya Kholmy prison. When Chambers arrived, he was greeted by Markov, who turned out to be a big fan of his. The man was then asked to shower and change into the clothes that had been prepared for the prisoners. Chambers, believing that he should not be in prison because he was framed, attempts to retaliate by ganging up on the prison guards, who are no match for him. As a result of his actions, he had to accept the oppression of the guards, who treated him arbitrarily, as well as the oppression of several prisoners who did not appear to like his presence. He shares a cell with Stephen Parker, a British prison junkie. Everyone seemed to be staring at Chambers as he entered the dining hall for lunch. Regardless of how people looked at him, Chambers appeared relaxed and enjoying his lunch. Soon after, Yuri Boyka and his men arrived at the dining hall. Except for Chambers, the inmates immediately stood up when Boyka entered, as if he was highly respected in the prison, despite the fact that he was also a prisoner. When the arrogant Boyka saw Chambers sitting relaxed and enjoying his lunch, he approached him and attempted to confront the former boxing champion. The guards intervened immediately before the fight between Chambers and Boyka became more intense and caused a larger commotion. Soon after, Chambers is visited by his manager, Phil, who requests that he find the best lawyer in the United States so that he can be released from prison as soon as possible. Phil couldn't make any promises, but he assured Chambers that he would do his best to find a good lawyer and asked him to be patient because the process would be lengthy. Hearing this, Chambers became irritated and left. Chambers saves Parker from being bullied by Boyka's men one day. He learns from Parker that this prison is controlled by the mafia led by Gaga after beating up some of Boyka's men who bullied Parker. It is revealed that Gaga was the one who framed Chambers for cocaine possession, which is what Gaga did to get him thrown in Chornya Kholmy prison and forced to compete in mixed martial arts matches against the reigning champion, Yuri Boyka. Boyka intends to make calculations after learning that some of his men were beaten by Chambers. But Chambers ignored him, then walked away and left him alone. That night, Boyka prepared for his fight with the challenger. Gaga, on the other hand, urged Markov to immediately stage a fight between Boyka and Chambers, but this was no easy task, because everyone was so excited to see Boyka fight. Chambers went to the arena and saw how Boyka defeated his opponent with a fairly brutal fighting style. After successfully paralyzing his opponent until he was helpless, Boyka confronted him from above the ring, knowing Chambers had witnessed the fight. But Chambers remained silent. Markov summons Chambers to his room after the fight and invites him to join the fight. Because Chambers refused his request, Markov then ordered Chambers to do extremely strenuous physical labor, making him believe that Markov and the guards were deliberately undermining his dignity. Chambers is at his most humiliating point in life when he is rescued by an old inmate named Krot, who uses a wheelchair. Chambers then returned to his cell. Meanwhile, in one of the prison's corners, Parker, who is secretly using illegal drugs, is visited by Boyka's men, who once again bully him. They then urge Parker to persuade Chambers to join them in the fight against Boyka. Not only did Boyka's men corner Parker, but they also attempted to gang up on Chambers while he was serving his sentence. Chambers can face them all with Krot's assistance, but then the guards arrived and blamed Chambers for all the uproar, putting him in solitary confinement in the sewers. Krot visited Chambers, fed him, and advised him to stop rebelling and follow the prison rules so that Markov and the guards would stop bullying him. Chambers appeared to think about Krot's suggestion, but he said nothing. Gaga approaches Chambers after being released from solitary confinement, who informs him that he could have been released sooner if he had agreed to a fight against Boyka, which both Gaga and Markov could arrange for his release. It was later revealed that Chambers' manager, Phil, had agreed to this and had signed a contract with Gaga to arrange Chambers' fight against Boyka. Chambers initially refuses, but after enduring humiliating physical labor in the prison's sewer system and witnessing the guards' brutality firsthand, he reluctantly agrees. After Chambers agreed to fight, both Chambers and Boyka prepared themselves by training hard, believing that their opponent would not be an ordinary fighter. Chambers continues to rely on his boxing skills and experience. Simultaneously, Boyka prepares a series of fighting styles that combine a lethal combination of kicks, throws, and grappling, all with the goal of humiliating his opponent in the ring. Boyka's men, on the other hand, return to Parker, who was using illegal drugs. But this time, instead of bullying him, they asked him to perform an important task during the fight between Chambers and Boyka. Finally, the fight between former boxing champion George Chambers and defending champion Yuri Boyka began. They both started the fight with zeal, determined to beat each other. However, Chambers was taken aback by the numerous variations of Boyka's attacks that were launched repeatedly during the fight, as he had not shown these attacks in the previous fight. Chambers, on the other hand, was able to fend off Boyka's attack and make it through the first round by keeping his distance, remaining calm, and delivering a painful combination of punches when he found an opening. Parker, who served as Chambers' cornerman, was visited by one of Boyka's men, who handed him a bottle of mineral water mixed with anesthetic, which was later given to Chambers. Parker was hesitant to harm Chambers, but he had no choice because Boyka's men threatened him. At the end of the first round, Chambers drank a small amount of water from the bottle, causing him to lose consciousness and collapse after a hard kick from Boyka. As a result, he was defeated in the fight. Krot then informs Chambers that Parker had tainted his drink with drugs. Chambers went to his cell, furious, to demand an explanation from Parker. He is surprised, however, that Parker hanged himself out of guilt, and discovers an apology letter written by him. Chambers confronted Boyka and blamed him for the drug incident after learning Parker did it on purpose because he was threatened by Boyka's men. Boyka, on the other hand, denied Chambers' accusations, claiming that he had never committed cowardly acts such as dishonorably cheating his victory. Chambers, fed up with Markov and the guard's oppression, and the other inmates then beat Markov because he believes he will be released soon after the fight with Boyka. Markov, on the other hand, sentenced Chambers to a harsher sentence, tying him to a water tower pole in the snow and beating him by prison guards. On the other hand, it turns out that Boyka was completely unaware of the actions of his subordinates who drugged Chambers. He then inquired of his henchmen about it. Because Boyka places a high value on sportsmanship, he killed 2 of his men who had purposefully drugged Chambers, regardless of their motivations for doing so for his victory. Elsewhere, Phil approaches Gaga and asks for money so that he can flee to another country because he no longer wants to care for Chambers and his doomed career. Gaga handed Phil a cash suitcase, but then he orders one of his men to murder him. Back in prison, in the cold snowy weather, Chambers, who had accepted his fate, was visited by other prisoners who adored him. They wrapped him in blankets and fed him warm food so he wouldn't shiver in the cold. Markov was apparently enraged by the prisoner's actions. He then gathered the inmates outside in the cold and threatened those who had assisted Chambers. However, an unexpected event occurred when all of the inmates came forward to defend Chambers, causing Markov and his men to remain motionless. Knowing that Markov had mistreated Chambers, Gaga filed a protest because he could not accept the mistreatment of his flagship fighter. Gaga then approached Chambers and apologized for the drug, citing how he has always emphasized sportsmanship in every fight. Chambers then demanded a rematch in order to be released, and that the fight be conducted in a sporting manner. Following that, Chambers requested that Gaga purchase jackets for all of the inmates so that they would no longer be cold. Chambers and Boyka returned to training hard after the rematch was set. Krot, a former soldier who trains Boyka in his fighting style, instructs Chambers in mixed martial arts this time. Chambers approached Krot in his cell after rehearsal and inquired about the little girl who was plastered on his cell wall. Krot identified the young girl as his niece, whom he hadn't seen in 19 years. He then explained to Chambers why he was imprisoned in the first place. His brother had committed a robbery at the time, and he was made a scapegoat. Unable to bear the guard's oppression, he fought back and accidentally killed one of them. While attempting to escape from prison, the guard shot him in the leg, leaving him paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Krot then revealed to Chambers his real name, Nikolai. Everyone seemed ecstatic before the rematch began because they had been anticipating it. They bet a lot on Boyka and Chambers because they both have a chance to win. Gaga and Markov appear to be in the best seats, enjoying the fight, while Krot, Chambers' new coach, appears to be on the sidelines. The fight was fierce and intense, with the 2 great fighters exchanging a flurry of combinations, grapples, and throws. The fight lasted a long time because they both have excellent fighting abilities. Chambers eventually realized that Boyka would never give up and had excellent physical resistance, which did not rule out the possibility of taking him down if the fight lasted too long. To win the fight, Chambers changed his strategy and managed to lock Boyka's movement with the Krot technique, and ended the fight by breaking Boyka's leg, proving Chambers had not lost his fighting ability and establishing himself as the undisputed new prison champion. Chambers was released from prison after successfully defeating Yuri Boyka. According to the agreement, Gaga then gave Chambers a briefcase full of money as a gift, but Chambers later used the money to buy Krot's freedom. Chambers pushes Krot to the train station to meet his estranged niece in a happy reunion at the end of the film. Krot thanks Chambers for giving him the remaining winnings to restart his life, and Chambers thanks Krot for his assistance in training. Not long after, Krot ran into his long-lost niece, and the 2 hugged as Chambers walked away. After losing a fight against George Chambers a few years ago, Yuri Boyka, the former defending prison fight champion, suffered a broken knee. Because of his serious injury, the mighty Boyka is now despised by Markov and the guards who turn him into a prison cleaner. Despite the fact that Boyka is no longer a fighter, mixed martial arts matches are still held at Chornya Kholmy prison, with Vladimir Saikov as the strongest fighter, of course, and are sponsored by Gaga, the mafia boss who was also Boyka and Chambers' promoter. Following the fight, Boyka, who now has long hair and a bushy beard, is mopping the prison floor when Gaga and Markov pass by. One of Gaga's subordinates recognized Boyka from his limp walk and handed him a bill, which he promptly rejected. Meanwhile, Gaga's prison tournament business appears to have expanded into an inter-prison martial arts tournament called the Prison Spets Competition, PSC, which gathers the best prison fighters from around the world to compete for prizes such as erasing all criminal records and early release. Boyka expressed his desire to participate in the inter-prison martial arts tournament when Gaga informed him that he would have a preliminary round at Chornya Kholmy prison, especially after he was denied parole. But Gaga declined because he judged Boyka's knee condition, which prevented him from participating in the fight. Boyka was so eager to breathe free that he started working hard to get his knee back in shape so he could fight again. He then shaved his beard and trimmed his hair. Boyka then threw water at the man and challenged him to a fight a few days later, just after the current reigning champion, Vladimir Saikov, defeated his opponent in the final round of the prison tournament. Saikov, whose rage had already flared as a result of Boyka's arrogant actions, accepted the challenge immediately. Boyka's fight with Saikov was brief, and Boyka easily defeated Saikov, becoming Russia's representative for the PSC event. Returning to the ring and tasting victory once more appears to have reawakened Boyka's fighting spirit, which had long been absent from the fight that launched his career. Boyka was soon transferred to the Gorgan prison in Georgia. He was joined by 8 other prison fighters from around the world, who would later compete in the PSC martial arts tournament. Warden Kus then gathered the fighters and directed them. Apart from Boyka, the tournament featured Kreitz from Croatia, Dupont from France, Mavros from Greece, Lamchai from North Korea, Silva from Brazil, Turbo from America, and Dolor from Colombia. When they were led to their cells, they noticed the officers cleaning a large area of the prison that would be used as a battle arena. Meanwhile, Gaga and 2 other mobsters, Farnati and Rizzo, discussed betting issues, with Rizzo suggesting that they bet on only one fighter with the best chance of winning, Dolor, who is also Rizzo's mainstay fighter. Gaga, who bet on Boyka's victory, and Farnati, who bet on Turbo's victory, kept their respective mainstay fighters because they believed in the fighting abilities of Boyka and Turbo. The prisoners are taken to a stone mining area the next day, where foreign fighters are forced to do hard labor under the watchful eye of the guards, while Dolor sits back and reads a book. The other fighters were apparently only allowed to train for the fight for an hour per day and still had to work long hours in the rock quarry, whereas Dolor was treated so special with private sparring sessions and was not allowed to do heavy work. Boyka has an argument with Turbo in the mines because he believes Turbo talks too much and does too little. When the fighters return to prison for an hour of training, Kus approaches Dolor and hands him a regimen of performance-enhancing drugs. The tournament day arrived not long after. The audience appeared ecstatic and risked a large sum of money to support their mainstay fighters, which would actually increase Gaga's and the other mafia's profits. Silva defeated Mavros in the first fight, which he won. Turbo's fight came next, and he easily defeated Croatia's Kreitz, making Farnati ecstatic. The fight continued, and this time it was Boyka's turn to face Dupont, a French fighter. He won again in the ring, and this time Markov, the guards, and all the prisoners at the Chornya Kholmy prison cheered when Boyka won the fight and advanced to the semifinals. The final battle pitted Dolor against Lamchai, and Dolor could easily win. Boyka, Turbo, Dolor, and Silva advanced to the next round as a result of their victory. Meanwhile, the defeated fighters will be removed from the location. Kus ordered his men to execute the fighters who did not advance to the semifinals, believing they would be returned to their respective countries. When the fighters returned to the rock quarry the next day to do hard labor, Boyka got into another argument with Turbo, which resulted in their fight, and they were thrown into a very narrow solitary cell. Boyka and Turbo then revealed the forced labor they had to do and the preferential treatment Dolor received in prison after they were finally released due to some manipulations by Gaga and Farnati. The 2 mafia bosses went straight to Kus in his office after hearing firsthand about the prison's treatment of their top fighters. When they arrived, they were greeted by PSC mastermind Rizzo, who explained that the tournament has always been designed to maximize profit while minimizing risk. The forced labor is done on purpose to physically weaken the other fighters, allowing Dolor to win the fight. Rizzo then suggested that Gaga and Farnati liquidate all of their assets and place their bets on Dolor, who can win and has been guaranteed a double profit by Rizzo. Gaga and Farnati agree to this arrangement after realizing that their fighters' loyalty is limited to their pay. Meanwhile, Boyka and Turbo fight again in the rock quarry, but they eventually find some common ground. Boyka and Turbo gradually gain trust in one another and concentrate their efforts on defeating Dolor in the tournament. Boyka and Turbo begin to use hard work in rock mining as part of their training to increase their physical strength after learning that the PSC tournament was orchestrated by the mobsters who may have determined the winner. Turbo discovers he has a knee injury after lifting a boulder with Boyka one day. He then gave him a pinch of the root of a herbal plant, which is thought to relieve his injury's pain. Boyka, who noticed the tattoo on Turbo's body, inquired about it. Turbo revealed that his son and daughter inspired the tattoo. When Turbo asks Boyka why he fights, he says that God has given him a gift by making him the best fighter in the world, so he must fight to earn respect. Meanwhile, Gaga appears to have doubled her bet in response to Rizzo's suggestion. Boyka will face Silva in the semifinals. The conflict between the two was heated. Boyka, on the other hand, was finally able to knock Silva out with a triangular punch. Boyka helped Silva to his feet and praised him for a good fight after he was declared the winner and entitled to advance to the final round. Silva, on the other hand, was executed not long after. Recognizing that Boyka and Turbo are more powerful than expected, Rizzo and Warden Kuss devise a strategy and direct the prison guards to beat Turbo to a pulp. Boyka was taken aback by Turbo's battered condition as he walked to his cell. Meanwhile, Dolor insults Boyka, refers to him as the toilet champion, and threatens to kill Turbo in the semi-final fight. Boyka remained calm, did not respond to Dolor, and increased the amount of time he spent training, particularly on his knees. Dolor, on the other hand, is seen working hard in preparation for the fight tomorrow night. Boyka couldn't stand looking at Turbo, who was still training despite being seriously injured. When the prisoners are brought in for the next round of hard labor the next day, Boyka tries to persuade Turbo to flee rather than confront Dolor in his injured state. Knowing Turbo was once a soldier, Boyka devises a plan for Turbo to escape into the forest, where security is lax, and survive long enough to contact the black market. Turbo was initially opposed, but when another prisoner reveals that the losing fighter will be executed, he reconsiders. Boyka tries to break Turbo's chains but is apprehended by the guards, forcing the two to fight the guards for the key. Turbo dashed into the forest after being freed, while the guards immobilized Boyka with weapons. Boyka is returned to prison, where he is confronted by Rizzo, Warden Kuss, and Gaga, who informs him that he has changed his bet and will now fully support Dolor, who has already won. Knowing he has lost all support, Boyka vows to crush Gaga and the Mafia's bets by defeating Dolor in the final round. The final battle started. Because Turbo escaped, Dolor proceeded to the final round and fought Boyka. The spectators and mobsters were both betting heavily on Dolor's victory in this fight. Dolor and Boyka's fight was intense, with Dolor taking the lead with his very fast and sharp block and hand attacks, aided by his larger physique than Boyka. Dolor took advantage of Boyka's kick knowing that he had suffered a severe knee injury. He snagged Boyka's knee and severely injured him. Dolor didn't stop there, instead attacking Boyka's knee. Boyka recovered despite losing his kicking ability and agility, relying on his endurance and pain tolerance while surviving several devastating blows. When everyone thought the fight was over when Boyka was kicked out of the ring, Boyka returns into the ring before the 10 count, catching a glimpse of the mop and bucket used for sopping up blood after the bouts, which bears a striking resemblance to the ones he used during his training. He then removes the blood-soaked mop pad and ties it around his knee. He starts using a new style that combines grappling, dirty boxing headbutts and elbows, wrestling, and wushu. He finally defeated Dolor by breaking his shin and dispelling Gaga's and everyone else's doubts about his ability to defeat Dolor. Farnati went to the warden's office in despair after losing a bet and losing a lot of money. He then shoots Rizzo, but Kuss eventually kills him. Despite winning the tournament, Boyka is not allowed to leave because the guards have not yet discovered Turbo. Because Boyka is to blame for Turbo's escape, Kuss says that Turbo will remain free while Boyka is returned to his original prison in Russia, to which Boyka responds that he doesn't care. Boyka, like other defeated prison fighters, will be executed, but Turbo comes to his rescue. Boyka and Turbo then made their way to the car, where Gaga was already waiting. Gaga, it turns out, ignored Rizzo's advice and instead doubled her bet on Boyka's victory. Gaga reveals to Boyka that he always knew Boyka was the best and strongest fighter in the world, especially when he was angry, so he risked his entire fortune for Boyka's victory and duped the other mobsters all along. Not only that, but he went above and beyond by saving and hiding Turbo when he managed to flee. Following that, Gaga presented Boyka with a suitcase full of cash in recognition of his victory in the PSC tournament this time. Boyka finally revealed his first name, Yuri, to Turbo before they parted ways. Turbo, on the other hand, finally admits that his real name is Jericho, not realizing that Boyka has a special fondness for religious references. Boyka expressed his gratitude to Turbo for liberating him. Turbo then challenges him to a future fight, which Boyka accepts. The film concludes with Boyka getting out of the car and laughing happily as he walks with a bag full of money to his freedom. The film begins a few months after the conclusion of the previous film, in which Yuri Boyka managed to escape from the Gorgon prison and live his life as he desired. Boyka is currently competing in an underground martial arts tournament in Kyiv, Ukraine. As shown in a flashback, Boyka appeared pensive, with sweat dripping down his face, indicating that he had just finished the fight and defeated his opponent. The scene then shifts to the atmosphere at the Chornya Kholmy prison in Russia, where mixed martial arts matches are held and where an unbeaten defending champion, a big man named Koshmar, is currently residing. Koshmar was able to overthrow his opponents in a short period of time, and his prowess was well known outside of prison. Boyka was spotted visiting a church in Kyiv one day. He apparently came there on a regular basis and gave some of his earnings as well as some scriptures to the church. Knowing Boyka is a street fighter, the priest advises him to look for a better job and avoid using violence to make money. He will eventually suffer as a result of the violence. Boyka appeared to be considering the priest's advice, but, for the time being, he has been unable to find another job that pays him enough to make ends meet other than being a street fighter. After that, Boyka went to the Kyiv Sports Center to train, where his manager, Kirill, approached him and informed him of an important MMA fight in Budapest. However, before Boyka can compete in the martial arts tournament, he must first persuade the talent scouts who will be watching the fight in the preliminary round. Boyka worked hard in preparation for the MMA championship fight, which he had been looking forward to for a long time. He had to face a fighter named Victor in the preliminary round. Their fight was intense, but Boyka managed to knock out his opponent with one fatal blow, earning the trust of talent scouts to enter him in the prestigious martial arts tournament in Budapest. Boyka witnesses Victor being taken to the ambulance on the way home and learns that the man has suffered a severe concussion and is in critical condition after fighting with him. Boyka appears guilty, and he recalls the priest's words that violence, even for good, will bring suffering to all. Boyka learned the next day from Kirill that Victor had died. Boyka feels even more guilty and begins to regret his actions, as he considers why he became a fighter in the first place. Boyka is determined to meet Victor's wife and apologize after learning that he has a wife named Alma who lives in Russia. Kirill tries to remind him of the martial arts tournament in Budapest and warns him that if he returns to Russia, his safety will be jeopardized. Boyka, on the other hand, didn't care and told Kirill to forge his passport and travel to Russia to meet Alma. In the Russian city of Drovny, Alma is seen solemnly leading her husband's funeral procession. Following that, a mafia boss named Zurab approached her and informed her that Victor had a lot of debt and urged her to pay it off. Alma begged Zurab to let her pay the debt in another way, namely by working for him until the debt was paid off, to which Zurab immediately agreed. Boyka arrived in Drovny not long after and rushed to the address stated in Victor's letter, which was none other than a community center, where she saw children playing soccer on the field. Boyka noticed Alma talking to a little girl near the entrance before a man took her away. Boyka then follows Alma, who is taken to Zurab's luxury club, which turns out to be his underground fighting club, where Alma works as a waitress. There, Boyka witnesses Igor Kazmar's fight, a very arrogant fighter who reminds him of his own past. But Igor was much more arrogant, making Boyka sick of seeing him. Knowing that Boyka had been watching him for quite some time, Alma approached him and inquired as to his identity and the reason for following her. When they were about to explain why, Zurab's men appeared and chased Boyka away. While waiting for Alma to finish her work, Boyka beats Zurab's men. But then Zurab appears, chases Boyka away, and warns him not to bother Alma again. Boyka was forced to leave because Zurab had brought more men with him. Zurab had asked one of his henchmen to keep an eye on Boyka. The following day, Boyka returned to Alma at the community center and informed her that her husband had died as a result of an incident caused by him, and he offered to assist her in repaying her late husband's debt. But Alma looked disappointed and turned down Boyka's offer before telling him to leave. Zurab, who appears irritated that his underground fighting business is suffering from a lack of dependable fighters, intends to find a great fighter to compete in his club at the fighting club. Boyka agrees to become a fighter in Zurab's club in exchange for Alma's freedom because he wants to help Alma pay off all of his debts. Zurab then agreed and stipulated that Boyka must win 3 fights and follow all of the rules. Zurab, it turns out, already knows who Yuri Boyka is. Kirill, on the other hand, contacted Boyka and suggested that he return to Ukraine as soon as possible, but Boyka requested a week to attend to important business. When Boyka was about to leave for the training ground, Alma arrived and asked him to leave Russia because she didn't need his assistance. Boyka, on the other hand, stated that everything he did was not to help her, but to save himself, who wanted to atone for his previous mistakes. So Boyka doesn't mind if Alma doesn't require his assistance. When Boyka arrived at the training center, he couldn't even train seriously because another fighter was bothering him, whom he knocked down with a single light kick. Boyka's first battle begins. This time, he'll face a fighter named Boris Tarsov, whom he'll easily defeat. While exiting the ring, Boyka is approached by Igor, who attempts to warn him in an arrogant manner. Alma paid Boyka a visit in the dressing room and gave him a drink. Knowing that Boyka was having difficulty finding a place to practice, Alma invited him to the community center's training room, which was usually used by her late husband for his training. Boyka continued to practice there in the days that followed, accompanied by children who seemed delighted to see him. Boyka had to fight two fighters at once in the second fight, the Ozerov brothers, who launched a barrage of attacks to overwhelm him. Boyka had a minor back injury during the fight. When he saw Alma, his fighting spirit rose and he faced the brothers again and again until he won. The next day, at the community center, Alma approached Boyka, who was practicing, and applied ointment to relieve his back pain. Boyka then inquired as to why Alma did not simply leave the city. Alma responded that the community center was a dream of hers and Victor's. She also couldn't abandon the children in this neighborhood, because without this community center, they could become gangsters, get involved in drugs, and possibly commit other criminal acts. The scene shifts to Zurab, who is bribing Koichev, a high-ranking police officer, to bring Koshmer to his club at any cost, because Koshmer is a tall, furious, and relentless fighter. Zurab believes Koshmer is a fantastic fighter who will provide him with numerous benefits, and he is confident that Yuri Boyka will be unable to defeat him. Following that, Zurab visited Alma and discovered that Alma had been assisting Boyka by providing a training ground for him. Alma refuses to believe Zurab when he tells her that Boyka killed her husband in a fight in Kiev. Zurab, enraged, pushes Alma and threatens to kill Boyka. Shortly after, Boyka received a call from Kirill, who informed him that a bus would be waiting for him at 9 o'clock at night, but, before returning to Ukraine, Boyka must fight one last time to ensure Alma's freedom. Alma was already waiting for Boyka in her room when they arrived at the hotel. She then asked Boyka to go into more detail about the night her husband died. Boyka was initially hesitant to tell the story for fear of upsetting Alma, but he recognized Alma's right to know the truth. Alma was very disappointed in Boyka after learning the truth, and she cried as she walked away. Boyka will face Igor Kazmer in the third round, an arrogant fighter whose ability does not match his big mouth. Boyka beats Igor, but he misses the bus that Kirill promised him. When Boyka is about to leave, Zurab forces him to fight one more match to defeat his true champion, Koshmer, and Boyka reluctantly agrees for the sake of Alma. Because Koshmer has a large and powerful body, Boyka cannot initially harm him and is instead severely beaten by Koshmer. However, in the second round, Boyka began to find an opening, and his attacks were able to hit Koshmer. Boyka managed to break one of Koshmer's arms and one leg during that fierce and intense fight, eventually kicking the big man out of the ring and knocking him unconscious. Everyone cheered for the mighty Yuri Boyka's victory. Because all of his mainstay fighters have been defeated, an enraged Zurab kidnaps Alma and orders all of his men to murder Boyka. Boyka, who was helpless after being severely beaten by Zurab's henchmen, saw Alma crying in fear as she was carried away by the man. Boyka stood up and used all of his remaining strength to fight Zurab's henchmen. He rushes after Zurab after killing his henchmen in order to save Alma. Boyka is shot in the stomach by one of Zurab's mafia associates, who is then shot by Boyka. Despite his injuries, Boyka manages to catch up to Zurab and Alma. Zurab then points his gun at Alma, threatening to kill her if Boyka does not drop the weapon. Boyka then threw down his gun. Seeing an opportunity, Alma bites Zurab's finger, causing him to hurt and then release him, freeing Alma. Boyka seized the opportunity and lunged at Zurab, punching him in the face and strangling him to death. Boyka, who had been seriously injured and had exhausted all of his strength, slumped limply in Alma's arms after that incident. He then requested forgiveness from Alma for what he had done to her husband. Before Alma could respond, Koichev and his men arrived and arrested Boyka. Alma pays a visit to Boyka in the Chornya Kolmy prison 6 months later. She was dressed in a white gown. Alma displays a painting of Boyka practicing that was created by the children of the community center. Alma then tells Boyka that she has finally forgiven him and thanks him for saving her life. The film concludes with Boyka being welcomed back as the greatest fighter in Chornya Kolmy prison, where he will continue to fight for the title of the world's most complete martial artist.